Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today it's the Cosmic Connections with Relationship Astrology. And my fellow astrologers, friends, and colleagues are joining me today. We have Justin Crockett-Elzy, Madam Simon, and Robert Passetti. Welcome, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
So we're talking about the relationship astrology. And Madam Simon is an archetypal astrologer, tarot reader, and visionary artist, and her website is iconalchemy.com. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, an astrologer, intuitive, certified relationship astrologer, and Dwarf Planet University graduate, and my website is alightpath.com. Justin Crockett-Elzy is an archetypal and Jyotish astrologer, teacher, author, and Buddhist. And you can reach him at justin.elzy@gmail.com. And Robert Passetti is a consulting astrologer, vibrational and psychological techniques, and his website is deepearthastrology.com. Welcome, everybody. You ready to get started on another show?
Yes, I'm excited.
Yep.
Okay. Justin's going to start us out with a quote.
Yeah, so we were looking for a good quote for the show about love, and this quote actually comes from Andre Breton, who is a French poet and writer. Hopefully I said his last name right, Breton or Breton. And he said, "Love is when you meet someone who tells you something new about yourself." I thought that might be a good one to kick off this today about this couple.
Thank you. And Robert, will you start us off with a brief description of the houses in relationship astrology?
Sure, yeah. The first house is about the relationship with self. It often also indicates our persona, our relationship with what we look like. The second house is all about the family as a unit and the family's values and possessions. The third house is cousins, siblings, neighborhood relationships. The fourth house is about our parents and our family lineage, where we come from. The fifth house is children, romance, and it can represent, collective creativity. The sixth house is also coworkers, employees, health issues within a relationship, and also pets. The seventh house can is about the love, close relationships, business partners, those really intimate relationships. The eighth house is shared resources with those partners. It's the house of sex, death, and taxes. The ninth houses can be our grandparents, our role models, how spirituality and religion affect the relationship as well. The 10th house is the parents, the family lineage, but also, it can also reflect, how career can be a part of the relationship, which we're going to see in our charts today. The 11th house, it's our extended family, our community, our friend circles. And the 12th house is kind of the hidden things, the hidden relationships, and also kind of the psychological depth that exists within the relationship.
And Simon, will you take us through the asteroids and centaurs, etc.?
Okay, so Juno is the asteroid of covenant partnerships, commitments, can relate to the promises that we make to each other and how we uphold our relationships. Pallas Athena is our strategic thinking and our wisdom. Ceres is nurturing and nourishing. Okay. Vesta is the hearth and home, the sacred spark. Okay. What we are focused on. Eros is love, erotic love, of course, and vitality. Psyche is the soul bond between people, and how does the soul know itself through the experience of love? Aya relates to health. Both things that may affect our health, but also what are the conditions for good health for us? Okay. So then going over to the centaurs, we have Nessus, who relates to trauma and abuse. Pholus can be a sudden turning point, also a hidden talent. Chiron is known as the wounded healer, but is also in the mythology as a teacher to the heroes. Okay. And other points that we see within the chart, there is the vertex, which can be auspicious connections or a twist of fate. And then the anti-vertex might be more challenging connections, also can be a twist of fate, but going in a different direction. Okay. The part of fortune is the element of chance. It's what happens to us rather than what we plan. And then we are using the natural position of Black Moon Lilith. And Lilith is what is untamed and what can be challenging to social mores and can reflect where we feel alienated or rejected.
Thank you. And Justin, will you do the planets?
Sure. So we're going to look at all the major planets. The sun represents the self, the core of the personality, and the moon, of course, is the emotional nature of the person, how we express ourselves emotionally. Mercury represents our thinking, how we think and how we communicate. Venus, of course, represents our desires and our affections, and how others see us, or our sensitivity, how others see us. Mars represents action and effort and how we like to take action and what we think about or how we approach action and effort. Jupiter represents growth and expansion. And so, how do we grow as a soul, depending upon what sign that is in? Saturn, of course, represents how the personality seeks to establish itself and represents how we approach our discipline, our work environment, and what can also represent some challenges or obstacles in our life. Uranus represents change because it is the planet of rebellion, revolution, and change, but also shows how a person is unique, especially when we're talking about creativity. Neptune represents how we view the collective, because Neptune is the planet of the collective. So whatever house that is in for us represents how we relate to the collective, and the sign that it's in also colors that. And last but not least is Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth. And a lot of times this shows what we have to let go of, a non-attachment from a kind of a Buddhist perspective. So it's regeneration and transformation. And so that is the planets that we're going to look at today.
Thank you, Justin. And I'm going to let Robert tell us about our couple that we're going to talk about today.
Yes, today we are looking at Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce. Taylor Swift, singer, songwriter, and global superstar. They were both born in 1989, which really dated myself when I saw that. And then, you know, they're both from like the northeast of the United States. They come from that kind of steel Rust Belt area, and both of them have kind of that hometown attitude going into life, and you see that a lot in their charts. But Taylor Swift, she started as a child star trying to break into the country music world, eventually moved down to Nashville. And she had some success, but really when she turned to like more of a folk singer songwriter is when she saw her career explode. And she's been prominent for over a decade now. Every album that comes out hits the usually hits the top of the charts. And her last tour, the Eros tour, was the most successful tour in the history of touring. So billionaire, very powerful, very Sagittarius. Travis Kelce, on the other hand, he is the football tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. He is known as one of the best tight ends of all time, if not the best tight end. He's very much under the tutelage of his older brother, Jason Kelce. They do a podcast together called New Heights. He's a Libra. He very much has that, that little brother energy a lot of times when we see him. And, he, but very serious when it comes to doing the work. And I think that tends to be the thing that we see between them, is that, there is this, we're going to play hard, but we're going to work hard.
Do you know how they met?
Actually, yes, I do. He, in true Libra fashion, went to one of her concerts and tried to give her a friendship bracelet. They didn't know each other before then, but that is how they met. Is somebody got a friendship bracelet backstage to Taylor from Travis, and that is how they met. A month later, the rumors started swirling about them dating, and they've been together for a few years now. A little bit of controversy here and there about, her presence in the NFL from the NFL fans, her fans judging, oh, you're with this football player. So, there's that little bit of judgment from both fan bases there about the other. But, they've been solid throughout. We don't hear a lot about, big tussles between them, and, they're trying to make it work.
Well, thank you for that, Robert. So here's Taylor Swift's astrology chart. There's no exact time. I mean, there's a rumor that around 8:36 in the morning, but since we don't know a time for either of them, we're going to use sunrise charts for both of these people. So, and the natal chart is December 13th, 1989, 7:23 a.m. in Reading, Pennsylvania. So, who wants to start? Jump in, somebody. Robert.
Well, I mean, we're talking about a Sagittarius, and we know that. And Sagittarius is definitely the spiritual primal fire, and I think that she represents that really well. And when we but then we just look at what's going on with the Capricorn, and we see where that work ethic comes from. We see where that kind of a little bit of a conservative nature towards themselves. She started out as kind of a conservative icon, but really broke out of that over the past several years, especially when the women's rights started coming into play. And you're going to see a Sag get activated when their philosophy towards life is put under question. So and with the Cancer moon, questionable whether it's Gemini or Cancer, we know. But I could definitely see the Cancer moon being, a big part of who she is. The Cancer moon is, it's the balance comes from nourishment, and that really reflects your songwriting a lot. It's really about self-empowerment, self-balance, being true to yourself, being honest about your emotional world.
Thank you.
So,
Simon. Oh, go ahead.
No, so I was just going to add something here, that's interesting to note from astrological on something you've already pointed out, Robert, and that was that she started out as a child star, yes, and early on her mother took her to Nashville, and they rejected her, and then she went back. And she worked really hard. And of course, this was around the time that her sun progressed into Capricorn. Mm-hmm. So that's when the Capricorn energy really came into play. She learned more. She doing songwriting and put all that Capricornian energy to work. The other thing that's interesting to note about her chart is the Cancer. Family is hugely important for her. Of course, they both have Jupiter in Cancer, so they grow through the concept of family, and we see that because we always see their mothers involved. You see Travis's mother there, and a lot of times the media will pick up on, anything that Taylor's doing, how Travis's mother reacts. So both of them have their brothers, their mothers there. So family is super important. And when we see Jupiter in Cancer, that's all about family. And the thing is her family really made some sacrifices for her as well. Her father actually invested in a company that she was working with as far as her creative art stuff, and the family actually moved so she could as she was growing in her career. So I just wanted to point that out, just to add that about the Cancer and how that Capricorn and Cancer energy is playing out in our chart a little bit.
Go ahead, Simon.
So kind of riffing off of what you were just saying about the Cancer and Capricorn polarity there. One of the things I find very interesting is that Jupiter exalted in Cancer opposite her Mercury in Capricorn. And Mercury in Capricorn can be very steady and patient, but isn't necessarily known for a lot of flowery language. But then when you combine it with that exalted Jupiter, now there is this greater capacity for expression that helps to elevate the people who are hearing it, to make people feel hopeful, to make people feel like their emotions are being touched and seen in this positive way. And if her moon is genuinely there in Cancer, then that just adds to that. We also have, I do think it's interesting, she's got this North Node in Aquarius, and that suggests that moving toward what is best for humanity as a whole is very important to her. She's coming from that South Node in Leo that is very comfortable with self-expression and with creativity, but that's on a very personal level. And now, karmically speaking, she is moving toward doing things that elevate humanity as a whole, that further human evolution. And from a traditional standpoint, that North Node would be ruled by that Saturn in Capricorn, okay, which is in a place of power, okay, that Saturn traditionally rules Capricorn as well. And so that really strengthens that work ethic that we see with her. But also that Saturn is loosely opposing that Jupiter. Okay. And when you were talking about, the sacrifices that her family made in order to get her where she is, and I suspect she's made quite a few sacrifices herself in order to get where she is, that, when we see Jupiter opposing Saturn, it is this combination that I call no gift without a curse, where you have to accept the good with the bad, and find ways to make things work despite hardship, and to see the silver linings in difficult situations. And I think that's very important, not just for her career, but for this particular relationship, because it indicates a willingness to work through any difficulties.
Yeah.
I'd like to
Saturn
point.
in its home sign, it's like she's willing to put in the effort, and if it takes years to accomplish, she's willing to do it.
And
Well,
you see that with the sextile between the Neptune and Saturn conjunction with Pluto. I mean, I would be very, there's an intensity to her work ethic, and it's very deep, and you hear it in the music. She's not somebody that just writes songs; she crafts albums. And we see that a little bit of how that could manifest as well with the conjunction between Uranus and Mercury. Uranus is very much associated with the musician. It's kind of chasing that next moment, and that really is what music does. And being able to communicate that in a structured way, having that work ethic that where you can make your dreams reality if you're somebody who can actualize a Neptune Saturn conjunction, and then adding that generational intensity that Pluto adds with that trine, or I'm sorry, that sextile. I'd be interested to see what she's going through right now, because we're going through a very similar situation with the Saturn Neptune conjunction that is being trined by Pluto. So that would be very interesting to see.
So I can speak to that a little bit, but I wanted to
Okay.
riff off of something that Simon was talking about, her writing, and I agree that when you get Mercury and Uranus conjunct Neptune, that's an archetypal signature for artists. That Neptune, anything conjunct the Neptune, so prominent. But the Sun is opposite Pholus. And as we, when we talk about her writing, and Pholus being that we talked about a little bit earlier when Simon was introducing the asteroids, Pholus does have an aspect of that creativity there. It's in Gemini, and it's opposite the Sagittarius Sun, which is Sag is the philosopher, the lyrist. When people have Uranus and Sagittarius, they tend to be very good poets or lyrical type of personalities. I might also say, even though we don't have it on the screen, her Arachnia is right next to that Pholus. So she knows how to weave words and so on and so forth. The thing that kind of I wanted to throw out to both of you, though, because she does have this intensity, and she is currently, from a Jyotish perspective, in her Saturn. Even though we don't know the time, there's a Saturn dasha going on. So you were asking about, all the prominent stuff with Saturn, and from a Jyotish perspective, the Sun ruling the South node is where her natural creativity lies, sun energy there in Sagittarius. But then where opportunities lie is through Saturn, because that, as Simon's pointed out, is the ruler of the North node. So we need to look to Saturn, and she is in a near the end of a Saturn dasha period, planetary period, which means hard work is going to pay off. But she's moving into a Mercury dasha, and which is really good. She's going to be even get bigger with this over the next 17 years with the focus on Mercury there. But want to ask you what any of you think about that Pluto squaring the nodes. That is a little bit really transformative, I think, as far as her goes. I'm just curious what everybody thinks of that.
I mean, anytime that you have an outer planet on the bending of the nodes, that is going to play a prominent role in how you feel about your destiny and what you are destined to do. And especially being in Scorpio, I mean, it's the Scorpion, but it's also the eagle. You're willing to go to the lowest lows and the highest highs to make sure that you feel like you're achieving your destiny. And I think the Sag Sun is important in that. Because that direction in life that she takes, it would be a very different story if she was a Capricorn. It can be a wild energy when you have that Sag Sun interacting with a Pluto on the bending of the nodes and how you approach life. So I think there's been some big successes for her. I probably think there's been some big emotional failures for her as well, feeling like she's not meeting what she is supposed to be doing, having to go through transformative processes. She had to do that at a young age. I mean, she was planning on being a country music star in Nashville, like that totally shifted. She was a conservative country singer from Nashville. That's how they were selling her. Now she's like, a big, huge left-wing icon, speaking out. And that Chiron in Cancer speaks to that situation as well, because she had to have, it's actually on film, you can look at it, she had to have a heart-to-heart with her parents and say, I don't want to be this conservative icon anymore. I don't want to, I'm not playing any more roles for you. I'm not dancing for you anymore. And I feel like that is very much tied to that Pluto on the bending of the nodes, like uncompromising about how you are going to approach where you want to end up in the long run.
Well, Pluto can definitely relate to control issues.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And I do think it's interesting you pointed out that Chiron, because it's trine that Pluto.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that speaks to a willingness to face one's deep wounds. And, if you look at her songwriting, she gets pretty deep, pretty intimate about the things that she's feeling. So, these aren't surface level songs, despite her being a pop singer. So I find that very interesting. Also, you mentioned this kind of, a bit of wildness with that Sagittarius sun. It should be noted that her Lilith at 29 degrees of Libra is also trine that Pallas and Ceres combination that we see in Gemini and her Psyche. Okay. So it's like she's got a little wildness on her soul there. That is the signature of somebody who will not be tamed.
For sure.
Well, and I agree with everybody about her Pluto. It's like she's, had the highs and lows, but she's been able to work and do the deep work that she's needed to do to transform and grow and to be able to step into her power. And then she can help other people with that too.
Yeah. Whenever you see the combination of, wild sextiles between Scorpio and Capricorn, that's not somebody you want to stand in front of. They are going to get to where they want to get.
It might take them a little bit, but they will.
Yeah, they will.
And then she has a pretty well balance between the 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water. And actually Travis does too. So it's really interesting. So any other comments?
No, I think it gets really interesting when we do the bi-wheel, though.
Yeah.
Okay, we have Travis Kelce, and we did not have a birth time, so we used a sunrise chart for him. October 5th, 1989. And I'm sure that's supposed to be Westlake, and I forgot in Ohio. I forgot the E on there at 7:32 a.m. So who would like to start? Simon?
Well, the thing that leaps right out at me is his sun in Libra conjunct Juno. I mean, that is a double whammy of partnership energy if I ever saw it. Okay. This is somebody who feels in his core the need for not just a relationship, but a relationship that is serious, a relationship that is committed, a relationship in which the partners are honoring the balance between them, and probably an equitable relationship as well. At the same time, that combination of Sun and Juno are square his Chiron. Okay. And that suggests some potential wounding, both surrounding issues of relationship, but also issues of home and family. But also this potential there that to really take those things seriously, and strive to create a relationship in which sensitive feelings are honored and respected, in which it is safe to be sensitive and loving, in which it is safe to express what one feels. And that's also probably going to make him, maybe a little bit private about those kinds of deeper concerns.
Just some facts to back up the astrology here. We don't see too much of the intimate relationship between Taylor and Travis, but we do see the intimate relationship he has with his brother Jason. Jason is also a football player. He was the center for the Philadelphia Eagles, and when in college at the University of Cincinnati, Travis got himself in a lot of trouble, almost got thrown off the team for partying too much. Jason kind of brought him in and kind of worked him, used his own, acumen and authority to kind of rescue him from that situation. And, now he's one of the best tight ends in the history of the NFL. He almost lost all of that. And you can see everything that you just said about the importance of relationships, the importance of the depth of the relationships that he has with his brother. Anytime you watch the New Heights podcast, there is so much admiration and so much respect. And, for, a 6'4" tight end, he really does, when he's around his brother, melts into the little brother role. And it's frankly adorable. And it's just very interesting how well that matches what you just said about him.
Yeah. So, the thing that jumped out to me was also the sun, but it was actually more so the Sun-Mars conjunction there, because Mars is right there too. So this means he's much more driven personality. And with the Juno there as well, really strives to meet others where they're at and really strives to get along. However, there's going to be some challenges with power and relationships because that Mars is squaring his Saturn. And so there's a thing where he's going to have to deal with power and relationships, power dynamics, and how authority is projecting a relationship, because he could feel like at times that things are unfair. The other thing that jumped out to me was, and just as a side note, his sun is in Sagittarius, and he got a degree in interdisciplinary studies. So there's sort of that Sagittarian energy of a really, exploratory mind and really open-mindedness in a way with his personality.
You mean the moon in Sagittarius?
That's what I said. Moon in Sagittarius.
Oh,
What
okay.
did I say? What did I say?
You said sun. I was
Sun.
lost.
I meant moon in Sagittarius. I was thinking about her, I guess, in my mind. Yeah,
Yeah.
moon in Sagittarius, and he got an interdisciplinary studies. The other thing, though, is about communications here. His Mercury is in Virgo. So this is very, very smart personality, very intelligent guy. And by the way, he was successful before he, as you noted, Robert, he was successful in his own right before he ever met Taylor. I mean, he's the highest paid tight end. And so a lot of people think he's on her coattails, but it's not. He brings a lot to the table already before he ever met her. And he's very smart with that Mercury in Virgo, but it's conjunct Nessus. So he actually can be very either like playful or, very truthful about things. There's a extreme objectivity. But again, I think the Sun and the Mars is going to be a little bit of a challenge because that square is Saturn. So he has to really always work on power dynamics and relationships. And of course, you pointed out he really does lean into his brother a lot. So that's where he also has to be careful not losing himself in a relationship, but how the power dynamics and some equanimity in relationship with that.
Yeah, and that Sag moon is sextile to that Sun and Mars conjunction. And Mars in Libra is technically in detriment, but that just means it doesn't like direct confrontation. It doesn't mean it doesn't know how to handle confrontation. It usually takes the back door into the access room of any confrontation, but it's still fueled by that fire moon. And I could speak on this because I also have a Mars in Libra and a Sag moon. So it's just when things become overwhelming emotionally, it can be a very much a challenge to that Mars in Libra, because you're not so good at the direct confrontation, but you still have to channel that manifestation of emotion some way actively. And with the Sun there conjunct, I mean, that's a lot of emotional highs right there, I would say.
I do think it's interesting that his Mars is in Libra and his Saturn is in Capricorn, because, yes, they're square to each other, but Saturn is exalted in Libra. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. And of course, Saturn is empowered here. Okay. So I really feel like in this case, that square is probably a huge part of why he has the self-discipline and the success that he has had. Added to which, that Saturn is combined with Neptune and with Vesta there. Vesta can really relate to our focus. Okay. And also what we hold sacred, and to have what we hold sacred be conjoining Saturn there, then discipline, self-discipline actually becomes part of what we hold sacred. And conjoining Neptune then is part of this overall vision. I find it very interesting. It's like a practical idealism and a practical spirituality that we can see in that placement.
And we're talking about two people right out the gate who have a Saturn that is in Capricorn and a luminary that is in Sagittarius. I mean, that is going to be very much wild road to get there, but hard worker.
Yep.
Really effort, that's for sure.
I wanted to say something about the Cancer energy, since I'm in Cancer, in their chart, and I meant to mention that her Jupiter's retrograding, which means a late bloomer in life, or even though she's successful now, she's going to probably have even greater success later on. And we see that her moving next into a Mercury dasha, which is about communications. And so, but it's interesting that his Jupiter in Cancer is squaring his Sun. So, and both of them are about ready to have a Jupiter return. And we've seen some things about where they may get married, and it doesn't surprise me because he's in a Sun to Venus dasha, and they're having the Jupiter return because his Sun squares Jupiter and her Jupiter's retrograded. My thought would be that they're definitely going to have some conversations about children, and maybe a little delay there because of their careers. But again, family is important. I think they'll eventually have children, but there's going to be definitely some discussions there, because of how their Jupiter is playing out in their charts.
Yeah, for sure.
So are we ready to go on to their synastry?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And we have Taylor Swift on the inner wheel and Travis on the outer wheel.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Sun Moon in the same sign between a relationship, it's you're going to get each other. I think here for the personalities as well. You've got the sextile between the Sun for him and the Sun for her. Within sign at least. So I mean, it's just it's Libra can get stuck. And I think that the Sag is a very freeing force for him. And her wild energy and her ability to kind of like move forward through things and be excited about things. The NFL is a serious business. Like you can have 3 or 4 bad games and then your whole career is over, or you can get injured and your whole career is over. I mean, I could imagine that being a very tough balancing act for a Libra, and that Sag energy, that sextile energy, getting to his Sun and to his Moon. I mean, being the biggest pop star in the world, I mean, she's just a ball of light for him, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I agree, and that's one of the things, because if you look at it for both of them, both of their suns square the other person's Mercury.
Yeah.
And so they definitely, you've noticed they've made time for each other. Like right now he's in NFL camp and she's down there in Florida. She has set aside things about her career. He set aside stuff on her career. So you see them traveling to one another. So definitely they're definitely always having to work on communications here. But the thing that jumped out to me at the chart, not so much that sun and moon in the same sign, but it's that conjunction of Venus and Mars. And this is a very positive aspect, the Sun and Venus and Mars in Scorpio. And his Eros is there, his love. So I mean, this is very, I'm gonna just be honest here on the screen, that's a very intense sexual relationship. That's very good for sex. And so I would say definitely this is a very positive aspect.
Some good chemistry there.
Yeah.
Simon, something?
Robert was about to say something.
No, I was just to say real quick, just as a transition, I mean, there are benefits to being born close together astrologically, because you're experiencing some of the same exact things at the same exact times, as far as the returns and the planetary cycles. And I think that they take advantage of this. And I think that's really powerful in Cancer here. What do you think about that, Simon?
Well, I do think it's funny, because actually I normally look for people to be a little further apart, because I really want to see more interaction with their outer planets, which you're just not going to get when they have all the same outer planets together. But in this case, I do feel like they've got some lovely little connections. Now, a lot of the things that I would normally do, that I would normally look at for synastry, I can't look at here because these are dawn charts. So we're not able to really look at any of the angles. And normally I would look to see what are their descendants, what are the rulers of their descendants, and what are they doing? Do they have contact or not? Okay. And yeah, they're not going to get the kind of mileage out of outer planet contacts that I would also be looking for. But that said, one of the things I really love is how his Ceres conjoins her moon. Okay. That is lovely, warm, nurturing, sympathetic energy. And since they already have, Jupiter, their exalted Jupiter's right there, then that just expands that lovely energy. So that's super sweet. I love it.
Yeah.
It brings out all my sentimentality looking at that.
Yeah. There's a
go
big
on.
there's a big push for them to nourish each other, would you say?
Yeah, her moon
definitely.
is on his Jupiter, right? And we also see the Ceres there as well, so I think, yeah, there's definitely, I think the bigger challenges may be with the square between the suns and Mercury's, but I might say her Mars sextiles his Mercury, but their suns are squared, so they really have to, and Mercury's one sun is squared the other person's Mercury, so they definitely have to communicate and make space. And as long as they do that, I think, yeah, this is a match made in heaven, I think, to be honest with you.
Well, there are some areas of concern. I normally would be more concerned about how both of their Neptunes are squaring his Sun and Juno, because that can create a potential for unrealistic romantic expectations. And, you can kind of get that, like, this big lift up and then this, like, bubble pop and disillusionment, right? But because they both also have Saturn there, I feel like that does act like a stabilizing force. And so that can be helpful. I do like her Psyche with his North Node. Okay, I think that's quite lovely. That Psyche does square his Eros, but when we're looking for Eros and Psyche, that square can actually be stimulating. So that can be useful. And her Pallas is trine his Eros, so that brings a wisdom to their sexual connection. That's lovely. So I am a little concerned about his Saturn opposing her moon and her Saturn opposing his Chiron. Because especially when it comes to moon Saturn hard contacts, that can sometimes feel like one person is holding the other at arm's length or putting up a kind of an emotional wall. And Saturn Chiron hard contacts can feel kind of like they're bruising our sensitive spots, especially for a Chiron that's in Cancer. So that's of a little bit of concern, but they both have Chiron, in Cancer together. And she has that Saturn Chiron opposition natally. So she's already used to having to deal with that kind of bruising feeling for herself, and therefore may be better able to, to kind of have coping strategies that may be able to be passed off to him as well.
And just to bounce off of that real quick, I mean, one thing we need to keep in mind with this Chiron is that hers is in retrograde and his is not.
Right.
So he can definitely, while they may have like shared wounds, I think that he can be a healer for her in a way that she's looking for. It's like, especially with that Libra sun, kind of bringing things into balance. And, like, I think he's very much a mediating figure in her life, and heals her through that mediation.
Yeah. I agree. And I don't necessarily see the Saturn and Moon opposition can actually be where one takes on more role of a parent. We see that dynamic between Capricorn and Cancer as parental energy here. So there's definitely can be some stableness and healing between the Saturn and Moon opposition.
Mm-hmm. Right. There's also his Mars squaring her Saturn.
Yeah.
And that one is a tough one. Now,
well, it's in his natal chart, so he deals with that all the time, and that's about what we were talking about, that power and relationships and the dynamics there,
Right. But it can, for her, we can get that kind of feeling of like, why is he being unruly? Because that Mars can be kind of unruly and impulsive, right? And then, Saturn is more cautious and restrictive. And when I see this combination in synastry, like it is kind of a red flag. That said, they both have so many Saturn ruled placements that I think they are both more adept at dealing with Saturnian energy than most people would be. Also, and this is like the flip side to, those red flag aspects, is that Saturn is the ties that bind. Mm-hmm. And when you have so many Saturn contacts in synastry, like, it's hard for people to give each other up under those circumstances. They're going to be more willing to try to work through the difficulties. And one of the things that I really think is important to point out when it comes to synastry is that what people's relationship needs are very different. Humans have this massive diversity. And for some people, they want something that's, very kind of, easy and, they can just kind of float through it. But neither one of these people are the kinds of people who want to just float through life. These are hardworking people. These are Saturnian people. And so their relationships are going to need to reflect that. And so therefore, it's no surprise that they would have these hard Saturn contacts within their synastry.
Well, that red flag with the Mars manifested. There was a big incident where Travis pushed Andy Reid, who was the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs, and it was on live TV. And the Swifties all came in and started saying, he's an abuser, like we need to get rid of him. All of her fans turned against him for a brief moment. She, in pure Sag fashion, came out and said, I don't really care. You know what I mean? It ain't like that. I can make my own decisions. Thank you. I have my own personal freedom in how I decide my relationships. So yeah, that definitely came to pass, and we saw that actually manifest.
The thing about what they want in relationship and what they desire in relationship, I always go to Juno and Eros. So his Juno's in Libra, so he strives for balance and harmony. He's a Libra, right? That's where his Juno's at. But he also likes intensity and love because his Eros is in Scorpio. Now, what's great is her Juno's in Scorpio. So she does like intense relationships, but her Eros is in Capricorn. So she also likes that stable, and she's very loyal in her relationships. So I think at the end of the day, these Eros and Junos are very, very complementary.
And going back to Venus, I mean, she has a Pluto on the bending of the nodes, and he has a Venus in Scorpio. All right. And, her Venus is in Aquarius. All right. And, he has that Libra quality, but also very much kind of the rebel in a lot of ways. He's viewed as, kind of a standout person. So just from a pure Venus standpoint, they both have very important synastries as far as just, how they manifest these planets that are going to be attractive to each other.
Yeah.
I don't think communication will be hard for them, because I think that they, like her Pluto square the nodes, it's like she's already done a lot of deep work. She's a songwriter, and so she sings and works things out, and his Mercury's in Virgo. So yes, he could maybe be a little more critical at times, but I think that as they grow, that they have good communication skills already.
Mm-hmm.
There is also one other little interesting tidbit here, because as you mentioned, that Venus is in Aquarius. Mm-hmm. And guess what's hanging out with that Venus right now? Yep. That would be Pluto. And Pluto is going to be hanging out there for a little while. And well, we can certainly see, Pluto can, dredge up our fears and lack of control and, or control issues or all of that. Pluto with Venus can also literally be the power of love. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I feel like this could be a period that just intensifies that feeling for them.
Well, and that's what I was pointing to earlier, because the current news reports are that they're thinking about engagement, which again makes sense. that he's moving into a Venus dasha. They both have a Jupiter return, which is about love and Cancer and family. And she actually has a progressed moon in Libra. So her progressed moon is going over his sun and Mars and Juno. Her moon, progressed moon on his Juno, right? Relationship. And he currently has a progressed moon. It's just moved into Aries. So that's about new beginnings. And he's moved into a Venus dasha. So I think they're actually, I would not be surprised if they get married pretty or have some engagement soon.
I think one qualifier for all of this is that this coming year is going to be his last year in the NFL. You know, there was questions on whether he was going to retire last year. It would be very interesting to see how all of this Capricorn manifests when one is gainfully employed at the highest level and one is not. You know, one thing about a Sag Sun, especially in relationships, is there can be the constantly moving goalposts, and to have that kind of dynamic change between the relationships where they're both on the top of their game and now one kind of has more, you know, ambition and power than the other. I mean, when we're talking about Capricorn, it would be interesting to see how that all works out in the coming year or so.
You know, I was going to say, looking at his to piggyback on what you're talking about, that I didn't know that he was leaving the NFL next year, but I was looking at his planetary periods, his doshas, his dashas, and Jyotish, and I would say he definitely would have. There's something very important about when he gets to 40 years of age, which is another 5 years from now. So I think he'll probably have somewhat of if he leaves NFL next year, there's some possibility he doesn't really sink into what he's going to probably be doing based on his Jyotish planetary periods till 40. So about 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm. He's definitely got the Libra charm, and he's also got a very successful podcast with his brother. So I'm not counting him out. I'm just saying it'll be very interesting to see. We're talking about the highest of high level people here. We're talking about the best in the best that millions and millions of people follow on a daily basis. So just that shift alone would be interesting between their two charts, because the Capricorn speaks for itself.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sure there's lots of opportunities coming his way. New opportunities.
Yeah, what I was saying is there's going to probably be a sort of a not like he starts this and he starts that. You know, I mean, it's going to be kind of there seems to be sort of this period that's sort of where he's figuring that out. And it's right around 40 that he does figure that he finally goes, this is where we're going to go, you know. And I like how he's always smiling too. That's that, you know, that Sun Mars conjunction in Libra. He's always smiling and looks friendly.
Don't discount the Sag moon. We tend to joke through everything.
Okay, now we have Travis on the center, and I don't know if we even need to look at this chart because we've kind of been talking about both of them, but if anybody wants to add anything, please do.
Well, I would say we only look at these, you know, flip-flopped if we actually know the actual times.
Yeah.
But we don't.
We're good.
Okay. So then we'll go to the composite chart of taking both their dates of birth and combining it together, and now they have a new chart. So who would like to start?
The thing that jumped out to me with the chart here, and I'm just curious what everybody else thinks. My eyes immediately went to the Sun, Pluto, Mercury conjunction. Mm-hmm. That this is a couple that through the relationship, they're here to redefine themselves. Mm-hmm. That to me is there's a total transformation or redefining of self here.
And it has. I mean, you know, this is probably her longest relationship with somebody who was famous. She had a longer relationship with somebody who was not a celebrity, but left that guy for Travis. So, you know, there is kind of there has been a rebirth to commitment, I think, for both of them. And that's pretty much what that aspect would describe to me, is that Sun, Mercury, and, you know, there's an active thought process in their relationship. There's an active intensity in that in there. So I mean, the Sun is the daily the daily grind and how we approach life on a daily basis, and they're very committed to this relationship and making it work. Whether it does is to be seen, but there is certainly a thought connection and an intensity connection in how they approach their day-to-day life, that what they wants to be together.
And a willingness to
Mhm.
talk about deep subjects, about potentially difficult subjects.
Mhm.
That's the thing. They're willing to talk about things that might otherwise undermine the relationship. You know, there's plenty of folks who can be chatty together, but then like skirt the deeper issues. And these two are not likely to skirt the deeper issues.
And they're very
Exactly.
much in service to each other. I mean, we're talking about a moon in Virgo. I mean, that is service-based love, service-based emotional language. And you were talking about the square between the Mercuries before. It's the short trips are the problem. There's a lot of that Sag energy. He flew all the way down to Buenos Aires to see her tour down there. So while they may have different schedules when they're in the United States, they make the effort to be in service to each other when they're doing big things.
Well, you see that
Yeah.
in with the composite chart, their Eros and Venus is in
Mhm.
Sagittarius. So this is a couple that's going to travel and go somewhere. They're not going to probably stay at home all the time. For love, they want to go to a retreat or they want to go travel because the Eros is in Sagittarius next to Venus. So yeah, they're going to travel for fun. And I love that Juno's also in Libra here. I think that's very positive in the chart.
For sure.
The
What do you?
relationship's very important.
Yeah.
And it trines the north node in this composite chart as well. Once again, we've got a grand air trine. In this case, with that Juno, the North Node, and with Pholus. And I think, Pholus there, it actually suggests the ability for the relationship to grow in ways that like uncover their talents, which is, I think, especially interesting for this pair, considering what you were saying about how he's going to be leaving the NFL. And yet, yes, there may be like, some awkwardness at first when he's not, operating on that high career level like she is. But I do feel like the relationship itself can inspire him to be able to uncover some new talents that maybe he didn't realize he had.
Yeah. And listen, look at what the composite does to the Saturn Neptune conjunction. It brings it within 7 minutes.
Mhm.
That becomes extraordinarily potent in our lives. That idea of manifesting dreams, but also having to be realistic about things, again, opposite that Jupiter in Cancer, there does need to be that level of, parental relationship at times, I would say, having to be realistic about things in ways when we want to be nurturing. And I could see that being a bit of a conflict at times, but I think it's more of a decision thing because they're both so comfortable in that Saturn Capricorn energy, just like
Yeah.
you were saying in the last chart, Simon. So, I mean, what do you think about that? Do you think I'm on the right path with that?
I do. I also think that we should not discount the presence of the part of fortune there with Jupiter,
Hmm.
that they are likely to have to deal with some unanticipated circumstances, twists of fate. These are two people who have hit these really great heights in their careers due to their dedication, their careful planning, all of that. But part of fortune hanging out there with that Jupiter, that amplifies the potential for unexpected things to happen. And at the same time, opposing that Saturn Neptune, and invoking that, no gift without a curse, something good has hardships attached to it. I feel like these two are really able to meet those kinds of moments. But the reality is, when you've got a power couple like that, that is very much in the public eye, it's kind of hard for them to avoid those unexpected things.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have to agree with you there, and I would also point out what also highlights that is the Hygeia. The Hygeia right between Neptune and Uranus there means, they're going to have and they're going to both have some changes that are outside of their control. In your just to riff on what you're saying there, Simon, I totally agree. There's going to be some things outside of their control that really kind of moves the map, and then, so they both have to kind of be aware of their stability and structure within the collective, and what that looks like, and they may not always feel, because Hygeia is there, that they have control of that, that control of how they're seen in the collective, or the structure of their career, or the structure of their relationship. A lot of people are going to make perceptions there because Hygeia is there. So it's about the health of the structure with when change happens with Uranus there. So can they do it? Yeah, but they just got to embrace that sometimes something might come out of left field that they have to deal with.
I mean, maybe I'm being a little cosmopolitan here, but I think that could represent either a shotgun marriage or an unexpected child as well. I mean,
I would agree. I would agree.
And I kind of view the part of fortune as the synthesis point, where we kind of are able to express our best self sometimes. It certainly is often expressed as a twist of fate or a change, but I could absolutely see that. And that may be very healing for them, because I would consider that in conjunction with the Chiron there. I mean, that could be something healing. It could also bring some things that are unresolved, wounds that from childhood, or, I mean, keep in mind, both of them were very much kind of groomed into career, I would say. So that is something that you could see as being an issue if they do have a child.
Yes. And
also their relationship with the collective that you mentioned there, Justin, I would like to remind us that the U.S. Jupiter and Sun are hanging out in that particular area of this composite chart. These are people who are superstars, partly because of how they tap into the hopes and dreams of the United States as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so the things that affect the fortunes of the United States will also affect their fortunes.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point.
we have one of our viewers that typed in that they are agreeing with what we're saying. So I just wanted to let you know that. And I want to thank our viewer for typing in a comment. So go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with both of you, all what you've been saying, and I think that because the Hygeia is there with Uranus and Capricorn, I think there's going to be some kind of unexpected changes. I mean, maybe not just children, but some unexpected changes in their careers going forward. And we see that a little bit. It'll be interesting to see the transits over the Uranus when he leaves the NFL. And then of course the transits when they eventually get married. So big changes. I would say if anybody's watching our charts, watch what's happening with that Uranus and Hygeia.
For sure.
Speaking of that Uranus, I do want to point out in this composite chart that there is a grand cardinal cross between that Uranus, Ceres in Cancer, Pallas in Aries, and Nessus in Libra. And I suspect that what that relates to is their reactions to change, potentially having them feeling pulled in all directions at once, which is something that can happen when we see the Grand Cardinal Cross in particular. The cardinal signs are initiating energy. They want to start things. They want to get that ball rolling. But when you've got it in the Grand Cross formation, then there's potentially some difficulty about figuring out which direction to go.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Pluto is transiting square their Mars right now. And Pluto is such an important planet for both of them personally, but also within the relationship, obviously. So it's going to be interesting to see how the times affect, kind of just the energy of their relationship. And it's kind of, you have the Swifties, and then you have the NFL people, and politically they're about as far away from each other as you can get. So with all of the changes we have going on right now, how do you navigate that situation from an energetic standpoint?
Right.
How do you become actionable in a place where it's hard to move? So I mean, those are things that they were probably dealing with right now as well.
Yeah. I might point out that her progressed moon is almost on top of that Juno in their chart, her progressed moon in their composite chart here, and that his progressed moon is almost on top of the Pallas.
Wow.
That's where their progressed moons are at right now, if you compare it to the composite chart.
Yeah.
I do think that this composite Mars being domiciled,
Mhm.
definitely increases their strength of will to deal
Mhm.
with the unforeseen, with the challenging circumstances in the collective, and the places where they might otherwise feel out of control. I feel like these are not people who will be easily knocked over by anything.
Right. And they're not going to attack it head on. They're going to do it from that place of Scorpio, which is kind of, a little bit more infiltrating and, not as direct, but still very deadly if it has to go into that situation.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I think that's awesome.
We have a Davison chart if anybody wants to speak to the Davison chart.
I think it just tells the same story we've been really getting at. I think the
Yeah.
nature of this is a Cancer versus a Capricorn dealing within within their relationship, and that kind of, they're both these nurturing people, but they both have this big ambition. And how do you resolve that? And really the idea is the integration. I mean, anytime you're dealing with an opposition, the only resolution is integration. So how do they, how do they still remain nurturing to each other, to their families, and still be on this road of the ultimate level of success that one can only dream of. And it seems like right now they're doing it. They're handling
Yeah.
both, and that is a very hard thing to do, especially when there's so much external pressure, especially when you've got a square, to your composite Mars from Pluto and Aquarius. But as you said, Simon, I just think it's that they have this strength of will, and it's not just the Scorpio, it's also the Capricorn there. It's just, I would not get in their way at all.
and I can't say enough about the family. Is kind of like this concept over here that's affecting their relationship. It's that Cancer family always involved, and I think that also lends to some really strong basis of support in their relationship. I mean, whenever I feel about the Cancer, I feel like, oh yeah, this couple's going to stick together because there's a strong Cancerian family. They both have the same concepts about family, and at the end of the day, family sticks together, right? So I think that's something that's kind of the third party here that's kind of affecting them both.
Yeah, I've been keeping my football politics out of this podcast, but one of the things that's been interesting is that they are brothers, Jason Kelce and Travis Kelce. Jason was a Philadelphia Eagle. Travis is a Kansas City Chief. The Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl this year, and watching Travis have to navigate the emotions of that, like, because listen, your football team is your family as well, but now he's got his actual brother, and you could see the writhing on his face when they were talking about it. It was, he wanted to support his brother and his team, but he wanted to, you could see that. And with a Libra who needs that balance, it was just, you could read it in his eyes, that the Sag moon that is very jovial and can can make jokes about things, kind of got a little bit out of balance there, when dealing with that situation where he had to choose between two families.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
Also, I do want to mention in the Davison chart, it's really nice that they have that Venus and Mars sextile each other.
Oh.
That's just super nice. Again, going back to like the hotness between them.
Yeah.
And they were conjunct in the natal charts, so yeah.
I mean, I think a sextile Venus and Mars is just, it's cooperative energy between those two things. So it just, in some ways, I think it's better than having the trine,
Yeah.
Very good energy between them.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining together so we could do this episode. I want to thank those that were watching live and thank those that come back and watch at a later time. And we're going to let Robert tell us about his slide.
Yeah. Justin and I, we do the U.S. Global Currents. I think we're doing one again in the end of June or July. We just finished our Magis 2025 Music of the Spheres event. It was very successful. We had our astrology theme. We did a really cool dragon ritual, eclipse ritual between the North Node and the South Node, exploring those energies. I also do the Turning Seasons with Linda Berry. That's a vibrational astrology podcast. And we are actually starting Fractal Cosmos this year. It's a vibrational astrology conference. It's going to be August 30th to September 1st. We have, a lot of great speakers, and it's going to be fully online. Anybody can access it, and it is now the only vibrational astrology conference in the world. So we hope you'll join us for that.
Thank you. And Madam Simon?
So I write about astrology, specifically about the astrological transits on Patreon. And I also create custom astrological art for my patrons to reflect solar return transits, to reflect natal positions. Do artwork there, talk about artwork, talk about astrology, all of that. So if you're interested in joining that community, you can find me there. Also, I am a consulting astrologer like the other astrologers here. So if you would like a consultation, you can find me at iconalchemy.com.
Justin?
And I might point out her art is amazing.
Thank you, Justin.
It really is amazing. So I do consultations, and I do a combination of both Western and Jyotish astrology. So I do a combination, and I do in-depth astrological natal charts. And so the best way to get a hold of me is at justin.lz@gmail.com. Thank you.
And we all do consultations. Most of us have newsletters and YouTube channels, so you can go to our websites and sign up or subscribe to any of those. And I also have a variety of other shows to choose from. So there's lots of shows for people, so lots of choices. And again, thank you for joining us. And Justin and I will be on the Archetypal Symbols panel on Talk Cosmos on June 15th for the 4-degree Cancer New Moon, doing karmic readjustment.
I'm excited about Robert's show coming up too with you.
Thanks.
Yes.
So
I am as well.
Thank you, team. And we're going to sign off here, and we'll say hello to everybody next time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uh-huh.